With $37 in her checking account and an eviction notice counting down the hours, Zara Coleman is cleaning office buildings at midnight to keep her daughter fed until a chance encounter with Park Joon-ho, Korea's most feared crime boss, turns one desperate slap into a dangerous salvation that will change everything. At 26, Zara balanced 3 jobs with the relentless demands of single motherhood. Her every waking moment measured in dollars and minutes she didn't have. She was practical, exhausted, and brutally aware that her best efforts weren't enough. Her natural hair, twisted into a protective bun, caught the harsh fluorescent light of the Meridian Tower's 20th floor as she pushed her cleaning cart down the empty corridor. She moved with efficient grace despite the bone-deep fatigue that had become her constant companion, driven by a vision that felt more impossible each day, a life where her 4-year-old daughter Maya never had to wonder if tomorrow would bring another eviction notice. The building stood silent at 1:47 a.m., a gleaming monument to the kind of wealth Zara cleaned up after but would never touch. Most nights, she worked alone in these sterile corporate spaces, invisible to the executives who conducted business here during daylight hours. Tonight felt different. A tension hung in the recycled air, something that made her pause outside the conference room on the northeast corner. "Tell me again about our friend in Portland," a voice said from behind the frosted glass doors. The accent was precise, controlled, unmistakably Korean. Zara froze, her hand gripping the handle of her cart. She shouldn't be hearing this. The building was supposed to be empty except for security and cleaning staff, and this conversation had the weight of something that wasn't meant for outside ears. Park Joon-ho sat at the head of a polished conference table, his presence commanding the room despite his relaxed posture. At 35, he possessed the kind of controlled intensity that made seasoned criminals step aside when he entered a room. Tonight, he wore a dark, impeccably tailored suit that cost more than Zara made in 6 months, his sharp features and calculating dark eyes never missing a detail. His reputation preceded him through every shadow in the city. The Iron Dragon Syndicate answered to him, and when Park Joon-ho made a decision, people disappeared quietly and permanently. "The shipment arrives Thursday," his lieutenant reported, sliding photographs across the table. "The Portland connection guarantees clean passage through customs." Joon-ho studied the images with the same attention he gave everything. Absolute focus that missed nothing. "How much are we talking about?" $50 million in pharmaceutical grade. Enough to supply the West Coast for 6 months. Zara's blood turned cold. She shouldn't be hearing this. She shouldn't be standing in this hallway. She needed to move, to disappear, to pretend this moment never happened. But her feet felt rooted to the industrial carpet as the implications crashed over her. She was witnessing something that could get her killed. "What about our problem with the Crane Syndicate?" Joon-ho continued, his voice carrying the kind of quiet authority that made grown men confess their sins. "Handled, sir. They won't be interfering with our operations again." "Good. I want every detail of Thursday's timeline confirmed twice. No mistakes." Zara took a careful step backward, her heart hammering against her ribs. The cleaning cart's wheel squeaked, a sound that seemed to echo through the empty corridor like a gunshot. The conversation inside stopped abruptly. "Did you hear something?" Zara abandoned stealth and ran. She sprinted toward the service elevator, her sneakers silent against the polished floor, adrenaline overriding the exhaustion that had weighed her down moments before. Behind her, she heard the conference room door open, voices speaking rapid Korean, footsteps beginning to follow. The elevator doors opened just as strong hands grabbed her shoulders. 2 men in expensive suits flanked her, their faces professionally blank in the way that promised violence without emotion. Well, one of them said, his English heavily accented. "What do we have here?" "I'm just cleaning," Zara said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I didn't hear anything. I was just doing my job." The men exchanged glances, and she saw her death sentence in their brief communication. This wasn't about what she'd heard anymore. This was about what they couldn't risk her remembering. "She has a kid," the second man observed, flipping through her employee file on his phone. "Lives in Riverside Gardens. Apartment 4B. Little girl named Maya." Terror crashed through Zara's chest like ice water. They knew about Maya. They knew where she lived. Her daughter was asleep in their apartment right now, protected only by 2 deadbolts and a chain that wouldn't stop men like these. Please, she whispered, her protective instincts overriding every survival strategy she'd ever learned. She's only 4 years old. She doesn't know anything. I'll forget what I heard. I'll quit tomorrow and disappear. That's not how this works, the first man said, his tone suggesting he'd had this conversation before. Bring her to the conference room, a new voice commanded from behind them. Park Junho approached with the measured stride of someone who'd never doubted his authority. Up close, he was even more intimidating. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of sharp features that belonged in classical artwork and eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of her terror. His expensive cologne, something woodsy and sophisticated, cut through the antiseptic smell of the building's air conditioning. You, he said, looking directly at Zara with an intensity that made her want to disappear. Conference room. Now. The men guided her back down the hallway, her legs moving despite her brain's insistence that she was walking toward her own execution. The conference room felt cavernous and cold, all gleaming surfaces and floor-to-ceiling windows that showed the city sprawling 20 floors below. Sit, Junho said, gesturing to a leather chair at the far end of the table. Zara remained standing, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. I don't know anything. I didn't hear anything important. I just want to go home to my daughter. Your daughter Maya, he said quietly, and the way her child's name sounded in his voice made Zara's throat close with fear. 4 years old. Attends little scholars' daycare on Maple Street. You work 3 jobs to afford her care, and you're still 3 months behind on rent. Zara stared at him, her mind reeling. How could he know so much so quickly? You're Zara Coleman, 26 years old, he continued with the same calm precision. Father unknown. Mother deceased. No siblings. Ex-boyfriend Marcus Williams, currently serving time for armed robbery. You clean offices at night, work retail on weekends, and deliver groceries when you can find the work. Despite all of this, you've managed to keep your daughter fed, housed, and happy. That takes strength. Something in his tone shifted, and Zara found herself listening despite her terror. I respect strength, he said, moving closer with the controlled grace of a predator. I also respect mothers who would do anything to protect their children. The question is, how far would you go? I don't understand. My men want to eliminate you as a security risk, Junho explained matter-of-factly. It's simple logic. You heard too much, you pose a threat, therefore you disappear. Along with anyone who might ask questions about your disappearance. Maya, Zara breathed, her vision graying at the edges. However, he continued, I see potential in you. You work harder than most people I employ. You've survived circumstances that would break others. And you have something I value above all else. A reason to be absolutely loyal. What are you saying? I'm saying you have a choice. My men can handle this situation in their traditional manner, or you can accept my alternative proposal. Zara's hands shook as she processed his words. This wasn't really a choice. This was a trap disguised as an opportunity, and they both knew it. What proposal? She asked, hating how small her voice sounded. You work for me directly, not cleaning offices or delivering groceries, but handling sensitive administrative matters for my legitimate business operations. You'll be compensated appropriately, $150,000 per year, plus comprehensive benefits for both you and Maya. The number hit her like a physical blow. $150,000. More than she'd made in the last 4 years combined. Enough to move Maya somewhere safe, to provide her with opportunities, to stop counting every dollar and every day. What would I have to do? She whispered. Handle my calendar. Coordinate meetings. Manage my legitimate business correspondence. Attend social functions as needed. Nothing illegal, nothing that would put you or your daughter at risk. It sounded too easy, too clean for a man whose reputation was written in blood and fear. And if I refuse, then my men handle this situation their way. And Maya wakes up tomorrow as an orphan who won't wake up the day after that. The casual brutality of his words cut through her like a blade. This wasn't a negotiation. This was a life sentence disguised as a job offer. Zara looked at him standing there in his perfect suit, offering her salvation with the same voice he'd used to order someone's death, and felt something break inside her chest. The helplessness, the endless struggle, the bone-deep terror for her child's safety, all of it crystallized into a moment of pure rage. You bastard, she said, her voice rising despite every instinct screaming at her to stay quiet. You think you can threaten my baby and then act like you're doing me a favor? Junho's eyebrows rose slightly, the first crack in his controlled expression. You want me to be grateful, she continued, her protective fury overriding her survival instinct. You want me to thank you for not murdering my 4-year-old daughter. You think money makes this okay? Miss Coleman, he said, his voice carrying a warning. But Zara was beyond warnings, beyond fear, beyond any rational response to the man who held her daughter's life in his hands. She was a mother cornered, and cornered mothers were the most dangerous creatures on earth. She moved before she could think, before she could remember who she was talking to or what he was capable of. Her palm connected with the side of his face in a slap that echoed through the conference room like a gunshot, the sound sharp and final in the sterile air. The silence that followed felt apocalyptic. Junho's men reached for weapons that Zara couldn't see but somehow sensed, their controlled facades cracking into something lethal and immediate. But Junho held up one hand, stopping them mid-motion. His other hand moved to his cheek, fingers touching the red mark her palm had left on his skin, and when he looked at her again, something had changed in his dark eyes. He grabbed her wrist, his grip firm but not painful, and pulled her closer. Close enough that she could smell his cologne, could see the faint scar along his jawline, could count the flecks of gold in his irises. You have fire, he said quietly, his voice carrying something that might have been admiration. I can use that. Zara stared up at him, her wrist burning where his fingers touched her skin, her heart hammering so hard she was certain he could feel it through her pulse point. Here's what's going to happen, he continued, his grip never loosening. You're going to take my offer. Not because I'm threatening you, though we both know I could, but because you're smart enough to recognize an opportunity when it presents itself. You're going to work for me, and in return, I'm going to make sure you and Maya are never hungry, never homeless, and never afraid again. And if I say no, she asked, though they both knew she didn't have that luxury. You won't, he said with absolute certainty, because you're not just fighting for yourself anymore. You're fighting for her. And mothers like you don't lose fights that matter. He released her wrist and stepped back, straightening his suit jacket with the same precision he applied to everything else. My driver will pick you up tomorrow at 6 p.m., he said. Bring Maya. You'll both be staying at my estate until suitable permanent arrangements can be made. Pack light. Everything else will be provided. Zara opened her mouth to argue, to demand explanations, to refuse this impossible situation, but no words came. She was drowning in the implications of what her life had just become, and the only lifeline being thrown to her was held by the most dangerous man in the city. Welcome to the Iron Dragon organization, Miss Coleman, Junho said, his tone suggesting the matter was settled beyond any possibility of appeal. I have a feeling this arrangement will be mutually beneficial. As his men escorted her to the elevator, Zara caught her reflection in the polished metal doors, a woman who'd just slapped a crime boss and somehow lived to regret it. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tonight, she just had to figure out how to explain to Maya that they were going to live in a castle protected by the most beautiful monster she'd ever seen. Zara's hands trembled as she unlocked the door to apartment 4B, her mind still reeling from the encounter that had turned her world upside down in the span of 20 minutes. The familiar smell of their cramped 2-bedroom space, cheap air freshener mixed with the lingering scent of Maya's favorite mac and cheese, should have been comforting. Instead, it felt like stepping into a trap she'd unknowingly built around herself and her daughter. Maya, baby, she called softly, dropping her cleaning supplies by the door. Mommy's home. The response came as a weak cough from the bedroom, followed by a whimper that made Zara's chest tighten with familiar panic. She rushed to Maya's bedside, finding her daughter curled under a thin blanket, her beautiful brown skin flushed with fever and her usually bright eyes glassy with illness. My throat hurts, Maya whispered, her small hand reaching for Zara's face. And my head feels funny. Zara pressed the back of her hand to Maya's forehead, feeling the heat that confirmed what she'd been dreading for 3 days. The fever had gotten worse, and Maya's breathing sounded labored in a way that made every maternal instinct scream danger. I know, sweetheart, Zara murmured, smoothing Maya's hair back from her damp forehead. Mommy's going to make it better. But even as she spoke the words, Zara knew the brutal mathematics of their situation. A doctor visit would cost at least $200 she didn't have. Emergency room treatment would be closer to $1,000, assuming they didn't admit Maya overnight. The $37 in her checking account wouldn't cover a bottle of children's aspirin, let alone the medical care her daughter desperately needed. Zara sat on the edge of Maya's bed, watching her daughter's labored breathing, and felt the weight of every impossible choice pressing down on her shoulders. She could take Maya to the emergency room and pray they'd treat her before demanding payment, but that would mean debt collectors and legal complications that could cost them their apartment. She could wait until morning and hope Maya's fever broke on its own, but the risk of something serious felt like gambling with her daughter's life. A soft knock at the door interrupted her spiral of panic. Zara glanced at the clock, 3:17 a.m., and felt ice spread through her veins. No one knocked on their door at 3 in the morning unless something was very wrong. She approached the door cautiously, checking the peephole to find a well-dressed Korean man she didn't recognize standing in the hallway with a leather medical bag. Behind him, barely visible at the edge of the frame, she could make out the expensive suit and controlled posture of Park Joon-ho. "Miss Coleman," the stranger said through the door, his accent refined and professional. "I'm Dr. Kim. Mr. Park sent me to examine your daughter." Zara's hand hesitated on the deadbolt. This felt like another trap, another way for Joon-ho to demonstrate his reach and her helplessness. But Maya coughed again from the bedroom, a sound that seemed to tear something inside Zara's chest, and desperation overrode her caution. She opened the door to find Dr. Kim holding his medical credentials, his expression kind but serious. He appeared to be in his 50s, with silver threading through his black hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to treating powerful families. "Your daughter has been running a fever for 3 days," he said without preamble. "Mr. Park's research suggests she may have developed a respiratory infection that requires immediate attention." "Your research," Zara repeated, looking past Dr. Kim to where Joon-ho stood in the shadows of the hallway. "I make it my business to understand the people who work for me," Joon-ho said, stepping into the light, "including their vulnerabilities and immediate needs." The casual way he said it made Zara's skin crawl, but Maya coughed again, and she found herself stepping aside to let Dr. Kim enter. Joon-ho followed, his presence immediately making their small apartment feel even more cramped and shabby. Dr. Kim moved to Maya's bedside with professional efficiency, his gentle manner immediately putting the sick child at ease. As he conducted his examination, pulling a stethoscope and thermometer from his bag, Joon-ho remained near the door, his dark eyes cataloging every detail of their living space. "She has pneumonia," Dr. Kim announced after several minutes. "Early stages, but it requires antibiotic treatment immediately. Without proper medication, this could become life-threatening within days." Zara's knees nearly buckled. Pneumonia. The word hit her like a physical blow, carrying implications she couldn't afford to process. "I can prescribe the necessary antibiotics, Dr. Kim continued, already writing on his prescription pad. "She should be significantly better within 48 hours with proper treatment." "How much?" Zara asked, her voice barely a whisper. "The prescription will cost approximately $350, Dr. Kim replied gently. "However, Mr. Park has instructed me that all medical expenses are to be billed directly to him." Zara turned to stare at Joon-ho, who was studying a photograph of her and Maya at the beach, taken during happier times when they could still afford small luxuries like day trips. "Consider it a signing bonus," he said without looking at her. "An investment in my newest employee's peace of mind." "I haven't agreed to work for you." "Haven't you?" he asked, finally meeting her eyes with that unsettling intensity. "Your daughter needs medical care you can't provide. I can provide it immediately, no questions asked, no payment plans or insurance complications." What rational mother would refuse? Dr. Kim finished his examination and packed his supplies, leaving detailed care instructions and promising to return in 24 hours to check Maya's progress. After he left, the apartment felt unnaturally quiet except for Maya's slightly easier breathing as the mild sedative he'd administered began to work. "Now," Joon-ho said, settling into their threadbare couch as if he belonged there, "let's discuss your employment terms in detail." Zara remained standing, her arms crossed defensively across her chest. "I don't want your money if it comes from drugs or violence." "An admirable sentiment," he replied with what might have been a smile. Let me ease your conscience. The position I'm offering you involves managing my legitimate business interests exclusively. I own 17 commercial properties throughout the city, 3 restaurants, a shipping company, and a charitable foundation that provides scholarships to underprivileged children. All completely legal, all generating substantial legitimate income. And the other stuff, she demanded. What I saw tonight is none of your concern in your official capacity, he said firmly. Your job would be to coordinate meetings, manage my calendar, handle correspondence, and attend business functions where a professional, educated woman's presence would be beneficial. Think of it as being an executive assistant to someone who values discretion above all else. Zara stared at him, trying to reconcile the man who'd casually threatened her daughter's life with someone offering her a legitimate job with benefits. The compensation package, Junho continued, reaching into his jacket to produce a folder, is as follows: $150,000 annually, paid bi-weekly. Comprehensive health insurance for both you and Maya, including dental and vision. Housing provided on my private estate, which includes security, housekeeping, and private tutoring for Maya. College fund established in Maya's name with an initial deposit of $50,000. The numbers washed over Zara like cold water. $150,000. She currently made less than $30,000 across her 3 jobs. The health insurance alone was worth more than she'd been able to save in Maya's entire lifetime. In exchange, he continued, I require absolute loyalty, complete discretion regarding anything you might observe or overhear, and your availability for business functions approximately 3 evenings per month. Your working hours would be Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, with weekends reserved for family time unless emergency situations arise. It sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. Zara had learned long ago that men like Park Junho didn't offer miracles without expecting something valuable in return. What's the catch? She asked bluntly. The catch, he said, standing and moving to the window that overlooked the parking lot, is that your previous life ends today. You cannot maintain contact with former friends or colleagues who might ask uncomfortable questions about your sudden change in circumstances. You cannot discuss the details of your employment with anyone outside my organization. And most importantly, you cannot leave my employ without my explicit permission. That sounds like slavery with better benefits. It sounds like protection from people who would use your previous connections to hurt you and Maya, he corrected, his tone growing colder. People like your ex-boyfriend Marcus Williams and his associates. Marcus is in prison. Marcus was released 6 days ago, Junho said quietly. His parole was expedited due to prison overcrowding. He's been staying with members of the Crane Syndicate, the same organization that's been challenging my business interests recently. Zara's blood turned to ice. Marcus was out. Marcus, who'd put her in the hospital twice during their relationship, who'd sworn he'd find her when he got out, who'd always said Maya should have been his daughter. He doesn't know where we live, she said weakly. He knows you work for Premier Cleaning Services, Junho replied, producing a manila envelope from his jacket. He knows Maya attends Little Scholars Daycare. He knows you deliver groceries for Fresh Cart on weekends. My people have been tracking his movements for the past 3 days. He's looking for you, Miss Coleman. And when he finds you, he won't be alone. The envelope contained photographs. Marcus outside Maya's daycare, talking to other men Zara didn't recognize. Marcus at the grocery store where she sometimes worked, asking questions. Marcus walking through her neighborhood, clearly searching for something. As if summoned by her rising panic, the sound of footsteps in the hallway outside made them both freeze. Heavy boots, multiple sets, moving with purpose rather than the casual gait of other residents returning home. Get Maya, Junho ordered, his voice dropping to a command that brooked no argument. Bathroom. Now. Zara scooped Maya up from bed, her daughter mumbling sleepy protests as she carried her toward the small bathroom at the back of the apartment. Behind them, she heard Junho speaking quietly into his phone, rapid Korean that sounded like military coordinates. The front door exploded inward just as Zara reached the bathroom, the deadbolt and chains snapping like they were made of paper. 3 men burst through, and Zara recognized Marcus's voice immediately. Where is she? He demanded, his tone carrying the same violent edge she remembered from their worst fights. Where's my woman and my kid? Zara crouched in the bathroom, holding Maya against her chest. both of them trembling as sounds of struggle erupted from the living room. There was shouting, the crash of furniture breaking, and then sudden, absolute silence. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, Junho's voice called softly from outside the bathroom door. "It's safe, Miss Coleman. They're gone." Zara emerged to find her living room destroyed but empty. The coffee table was overturned, her few decorations scattered across the floor, but there was no sign of Marcus or his associates. Junho stood near the broken door, straightening his suit jacket, not a hair out of place despite whatever had just occurred. "They won't be returning," he said simply. "Ever." "What did you do?" "I protected my investment," he replied, his dark eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her shiver. "You and Maya are under my protection now. That means anyone who threatens you answers to me personally." Zara looked around her destroyed apartment, holding Maya close, and felt the last of her illusions about independent survival crumble into dust. Marcus had found them. He would have taken Maya, hurt them both, destroyed what little stability she'd managed to build. Maya stirred in her arms, coughing softly but breathing easier thanks to the medication Dr. Kim had provided. Medication she couldn't have afforded. Medical care she couldn't have accessed. Protection she couldn't have provided. The choice had been made for her the moment Marcus walked out of prison. She could accept Junho's offer and give Maya a chance at safety and opportunity, or she could cling to her pride and watch her daughter suffer the consequences. "I'll do anything to protect my daughter," she said finally, the words feeling like a confession and a surrender all at once. "I know," Junho replied, his voice carrying something that might have been respect. "That's exactly why you're perfect for this position. My car will be here in 20 minutes to take you and Maya somewhere secure. Pack only what you can't replace. Everything else will be provided." As Zara gathered their few precious possessions, she caught sight of herself in the cracked mirror above their dresser. She was no longer just a struggling single mother trying to make it paycheck to paycheck. She was Park Junho's newest employee, bought and paid for with her daughter's safety and her own desperation. The woman staring back at her looked terrified, determined, and utterly transformed. Tomorrow would bring a different life entirely, one where her daughter would never go hungry or untreated, but where Zara herself would belong to the most dangerous man in the city. She picked up Maya, who was already sleeping peacefully in her arms, and followed Junho toward a future she couldn't have imagined 12 hours ago. The Park estate revealed itself like a fortress disguised as a palace, rising from manicured grounds behind gates that looked more ornamental than functional, until Zara noticed the subtle reinforcement and electronic monitoring systems woven throughout the decorative ironwork. At 4:47 a.m., exhausted and carrying a sleeping Maya, she followed Junho through the main entrance into a world that belonged in architectural magazines rather than her reality. The foyer alone was larger than her entire former apartment, all polished marble and soaring ceilings with a crystal chandelier that caught the early morning light filtering through tall windows. Everything spoke of wealth accumulated over generations. The Persian rugs that probably cost more than her annual salary, oil paintings in heavy gold frames, furniture that looked both ancient and perfectly preserved. Maya stirred in her arms, opening fever-brightened eyes to take in their surroundings with the wonder of a child entering a fairy tale palace. "Are we in a castle, Mommy?" she whispered, her voice still hoarse but stronger thanks to Dr. Kim's treatment. "Something like that, sweetheart," Zara murmured, trying to process the implications of what their lives had just become. Mrs. Park, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and an air of unshakable competence, appeared as if materialized from the shadows. She spoke briefly with Junho in Korean before turning to Zara with a warm smile. "I am Mrs. Park, the estate manager," she said in lightly accented English. "Mr. Park has asked me to show you to your quarters and help you settle in. The little one needs rest and proper care." The guest wing, as Mrs. Park called it, consisted of a spacious bedroom suite with an adjoining room that had been hastily converted into a child's paradise. Maya's room featured a canopy bed with soft pink linens, toys that looked fresh from expensive boutiques, and a bookshelf filled with children's classics in beautiful hardcover editions. "How did you know?" Zara asked, running her fingers over a stuffed elephant that was exactly like the one Maya had loved and lost when they'd been evicted from their previous apartment. Mr. Park is very thorough, Mrs. Park replied diplomatically. He believes children should feel secure and welcomed. Dr. Kim will return this afternoon to check on Maya's progress, and Miss Chun, the private tutor, will begin assessments once she's feeling better. Private tutor. Zara tried to wrap her mind around the concept. Yesterday, she'd been worried about affording Maya's daycare. Today, her daughter had a private tutor and medical care on call. Over the following days, Zara discovered that life on the Park estate operated with the precision of a luxury hotel combined with the security protocols of a military installation. Guards were present but discreet, positioned throughout the grounds in a way that made them nearly invisible until you knew what to look for. The staff treated Maya like a beloved family member while maintaining professional distance with Zara that felt respectful rather than cold. Zara's new office occupied a corner of the estate's business wing, equipped with everything she could need to manage Junho's legitimate operations. The work proved more substantial than she'd expected, coordinating meetings with city planning officials for his real estate developments, reviewing applications for his scholarship foundation, managing the complex logistics of his restaurant supply chains. I need you to handle the zoning committee meeting next week, Junho said during their third morning briefing, sliding a thick folder across his desk. The Patterson property development depends on their approval, and some committee members have been expressing concerns about traffic impact. What kind of concerns? Zara asked, reviewing the architectural plans with genuine interest. The kind that disappear when presented with proper traffic studies and community benefit projections, he replied. You have a background in education. I want you to emphasize how the development will include a new public library and expanded parking for the elementary school. It was legitimate work, challenging and engaging in ways her previous jobs had never been. Watching Junho operate in his business capacity revealed a different side of him, still controlled and decisive, but focused on creating value and solving problems rather than the darker activities she'd witnessed that first night. Maya thrived in their new environment with the resilience that made Zara simultaneously proud and heartbroken. Within a week, her pneumonia had cleared completely, and she was exploring the estate's gardens with Miss Chun, chattering excitedly about the Korean words she was learning and the stories from Junho's extensive library. Uncle Jun teaches me numbers in Korean, Maya announced during dinner one evening, her small face glowing with pride. Hannah, dull, set, net, daciet. Very good, Junho said gravely, as if her pronunciation was a matter of utmost importance. Tomorrow we will learn colors. Watching him interact with Maya revealed a gentleness that seemed to surprise him as much as it did Zara. He would spend 20 minutes helping Maya sound out difficult words, his infinite patience with her questions standing in stark contrast to the man who'd eliminated 3 armed intruders without seeming to break a sweat. The moment that shifted something fundamental between Zara and Junho came unexpectedly during Maya's second week at the estate. Zara woke to the sound of crying from Maya's room, not the fever-induced whimpers they'd left behind, but the heartbroken sobs of a child trapped in nightmare. She rushed to Maya's bedside to find her daughter sitting up, tears streaming down her face, reaching toward shadows only she could see. The bad man took you, Maya cried, clutching Zara's nightgown. He took you, and I couldn't find you, and there was nowhere safe. Zara gathered Maya into her arms, rocking her gently while murmuring reassurances, but the child remained inconsolable. 3 months of trauma and upheaval had finally caught up with her in dreams, and nothing Zara said seemed able to pull her back from whatever dark place her mind had gone. A soft knock on the doorframe made them both look up. Junho stood there in silk pajama pants and a white t-shirt, his hair slightly mussed, looking more human than she'd ever seen him. May I? He asked quietly. Without waiting for an answer, he approached the bed and settled beside them, his presence immediately calming in a way that surprised Zara. Maya looked at him with wide, tear-filled eyes, hiccuping softly. You know, he said conversationally, as if discussing the weather rather than nightmares, when I was your age, I used to have bad dreams about monsters that lived in the walls of our house. Really? Maya whispered, her crying beginning to slow. Terrible monsters with sharp teeth and loud voices. Junho continued, his tone serious but gentle. They would chase me through my dreams, and I would wake up scared and alone. What did you do? She asked, unconsciously leaning closer to him. My grandmother taught me a secret, he said, reaching over to smooth Maya's hair with surprising tenderness. She told me that dreams are like television channels. If you don't like what you're watching, you can change the channel. Maya giggled despite her tears. Dreams aren't television. No, but your mind works the same way, he explained patiently. When bad dreams try to scare you, you tell them to change the channel to something better. What would you rather dream about? Unicorns, Maya said immediately. And ice cream. And flying. Perfect, Junho said solemnly. From now on, when bad dreams try to visit, you tell them Uncle Jun said you're only allowed to dream about unicorns eating ice cream while flying. And if they argue, you tell them Uncle Jun will have words with them personally. Maya laughed, the last of her tears disappearing as she processed this grave promise. Will you really talk to my bad dreams? I am very scary when I need to be, he said with complete seriousness. Even nightmares are afraid of me. The simple exchange transformed something in Maya's demeanor, but it also revealed something about Junho that Zara hadn't expected to see. Beneath the controlled exterior and dangerous reputation lived someone who understood childhood fear intimately, who could offer comfort without condescension or impatience. After Maya fell back asleep, Zara found herself walking Junho to the door of their suite. Thank you, she said quietly. I've never seen her calm down that quickly from a nightmare. Children need to feel protected, he replied, his dark eyes meeting hers in the dim hallway light. When they believe someone stronger is watching over them, they can rest. Is that what you're doing for us? She asked. Watching over us. Among other things, he said, and for a moment, the careful distance he maintained seemed to waver slightly. The test of her loyalty came 2 weeks later, disguised as a routine compliance audit. Agent Rodriguez from the Treasury Department arrived with credentials and a polite smile, asking for access to Junho's business records for what he described as a standard review of the Scholarship Foundation's tax-exempt status. Zara recognized the fishing expedition immediately. Agent Rodriguez asked too many detailed questions about Junho's daily schedule, pressed for information about business associates who had nothing to do with the foundation, and showed particular interest in any overseas financial transactions. I'm just trying to ensure all the paperwork is in order, he said with practiced innocence. Mr. Park's foundation does excellent work, but we need to verify that all funding sources are properly documented. Of course, Zara replied smoothly. I can provide you with the foundation's complete financial records, donor lists, and grant distributions for the past 3 years. However, Mr. Park's personal business activities fall outside the scope of a foundation audit, so I won't be able to share information about his other interests. Agent Rodriguez spent another hour probing, looking for any crack in her professional demeanor, any hint that she might be willing to share information in exchange for some imagined immunity or protection. Zara maintained perfect courtesy while revealing absolutely nothing beyond what was legally required. After he left, she found Junho waiting in his office, having obviously observed the entire interview through security monitors. You handled that well, he said without preamble. He was fishing for anything that might be useful in a criminal investigation, Zara replied. I assume that's not the kind of cooperation you expect from your employees. It's exactly the kind of loyalty I require, he corrected, studying her with that unsettling intensity. Agent Rodriguez will report that you're professional, cooperative within legal boundaries, and completely trustworthy. That assessment protects both of us. Something shifted in his expression, a flicker of what might have been approval or respect. Most people in your position would have been tempted to curry favor with federal agents, he observed. The fact that you weren't suggests you understand the true nature of loyalty. I understand that you're protecting Maya and me, Zara said carefully. That makes you worthy of my discretion, regardless of what I might think about your other activities. The days settled into a routine that felt surprisingly normal despite their extraordinary circumstances. Zara managed Junho's legitimate business interests with growing competence and genuine engagement. Maya flourished under Miss Chen's patient instruction and Dr. Kim's attentive care. The three of them shared breakfast most mornings, with Maya chattering about her lessons while Junho listened with the focused attention he gave everything that mattered to him. But the illusion of safety was shattered by intelligence reports that began arriving during Maya's 3rd week at the estate. The Crane Syndicate had not only survived their previous encounter with Junho's organization, but had absorbed several smaller criminal groups, including the crew that had facilitated Marcus's early release from prison. Marcus Williams has been in contact with Crane leadership, Junho informed Zara during a private briefing in his office. They're offering him resources to pursue what he considers unfinished business. What kind of resources? She asked, though she dreaded the answer. The kind that can locate people who have disappeared into protected environments, he replied grimly. The Crane Syndicate specializes in finding leverage against their enemies. They believe you and Maya represent valuable leverage against me. Are we? She asked quietly. Junho was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes studying her face as if memorizing every detail. You're becoming more valuable to me than they could possibly understand, he said finally, which makes you infinitely more dangerous to leave unprotected. That night, as Zara tucked Maya into her canopy bed, she realized that somewhere between the nightmare comfort and shared breakfasts, she had begun to trust Park Junho not just as a protector, but as a man who genuinely cared about their well-being. The realization should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like the first real security she'd experienced since Maya's birth. 3 months after arriving at the Park estate, Zara woke to the sound of Maya's laughter echoing through the gardens below her bedroom window. She found her daughter helping Junho tend to his prized orchids, her small hands carefully holding a watering can while he guided her movements with infinite patience. Very gentle, he was saying, his deep voice carrying clearly through the morning air. Orchids are like people, Maya. They need attention and care, but too much at once can hurt them. Like when mommy gets worried and squeezes me too tight, Maya observed with the profound wisdom of a 4-year-old. Exactly like that, Junho agreed solemnly, and Zara watched him smile with genuine warmth as Maya beamed at his approval. The transformation in their lives over 3 months felt surreal in its completeness. Maya had gained weight, her chronic cough had disappeared entirely, and her vocabulary had expanded to include Korean phrases she used with unconscious fluency. More importantly, she had lost the hyper-vigilant wariness that had shadowed her during their months of instability and fear. Zara's role had evolved beyond simple administrative work into something resembling true partnership in Junho's legitimate business operations. She attended city planning meetings, negotiated vendor contracts, and managed the Scholarship Foundation's grant review process with growing confidence and expertise. The work engaged her mind in ways she'd forgotten were possible, and her suggestions had begun influencing major decisions. But it was the quiet moments that revealed how profoundly their dynamic had shifted. Junho no longer felt like her dangerous employer. He felt like family in ways that both comforted and terrified her. Good morning, she called from the garden door, approaching them with coffee for herself and Junho. Mommy, look, Maya exclaimed, pointing to a delicate white orchid that had bloomed overnight. Uncle June says this one is special because it only flowers once a year, and it chose today just for us. Uncle June has excellent timing, Zara replied, meeting his eyes over Maya's head with a warmth that had become natural between them. Their morning routine had settled into comfortable domesticity. Breakfast together while Maya chattered about her lessons, quiet discussion of the day's business while Maya worked on art projects, shared dinners where Junho patiently answered Maya's endless questions about everything from Korean history to why flowers needed roots. Tonight, however, felt different. Maya had fallen asleep early, exhausted from a day of exploring the estate's pond with Miss Chun, and Zara found herself alone with Junho in his private study for the first time in weeks. The study reflected his personality perfectly. Dark wood panels, leather furniture worn soft with use, and walls lined with books in Korean, English, and Chinese. A small bar occupied one corner, and Junho poured them each a glass of wine without asking if she wanted one. The Crane situation is escalating, he said without preamble, handing her the wine. My intelligence sources report they're planning a coordinated response to our previous interventions. What kind of response? Zara asked, though she dreaded the answer. The kind designed to hit me where they believe I'm most vulnerable, he replied, moving to stand by the window that overlooked the gardens. They've identified you and Maya as high-value targets. The wine turned bitter in her mouth. Are we putting you at risk by being here? Junho turned from the window, his dark eyes holding an intensity she hadn't seen since their first night. "You're not putting me at risk," he said quietly. "You're giving me something worth protecting that I haven't had in a very long time." "What do you mean?" He was quiet for so long that Zara thought he might not answer. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight of memory and regret that made her chest tighten. "I had a family once," he said finally. "A younger brother named Minjun. He was brilliant, funny, everything good that I couldn't be while building this empire. He was studying medicine at Seoul National University, planning to become a pediatric surgeon." "Had," Zara repeated softly. "Minjun fell in love with a girl whose father owed money to the Crane Syndicate." Junho continued, his knuckles white as he gripped his wine glass. "I was so focused on expanding my territory, so obsessed with proving my strength, that I dismissed his warnings when the Crane organization began pressuring them both." Zara set down her wine and moved closer, recognizing the signs of pain being carefully controlled. The girl tried to break up with him to protect him, but Minjun was stubborn. He loved her completely, and he refused to abandon her when she needed him most. So he decided to handle the situation himself. "What happened?" she asked, though the devastation in his voice already told her the answer. "He went to meet with Crane leadership alone, thinking he could negotiate or reason with them," Junho said, his composure finally cracking slightly. "He was 22 years old, naive about how organizations like theirs actually operate. They killed him slowly, over 3 days, to send me a message about the consequences of protecting people they considered their property." Zara's breath caught as the full horror of his loss settled over her. She could imagine Junho receiving that news, the guilt and rage that would have consumed him. "By the time I realized what was happening, he was already dead," Junho continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "I found his body dumped outside my office building, mutilated in ways designed to maximize my psychological damage. They left a note explaining that this was the price of interfering in their business." "I'm so sorry," Zara said, reaching out instinctively to touch his arm. "I built my reputation on the systematic destruction of everyone involved in his death," he said, not pulling away from her touch. "It took me 3 years to hunt down every person who participated, every person who gave orders, every person who knew and did nothing. When I was finished, the Crane Syndicate had been reduced to scattered survivors operating out of other cities. But they regrouped," she observed. "They regrouped," he confirmed. "And now they want to repay the debt by taking from me what they believe I value most." He turned to face her fully, his dark eyes holding in vulnerability she'd never seen before. "I couldn't save Minjun because I was too arrogant to take the threat seriously, too focused on my own power to protect someone who depended on me," he said. "I failed him completely, and he died because of my negligence." "That's not your fault, isn't it?" he asked with bitter certainty. "I had the resources, the intelligence network, the power to eliminate the threat before it touched him. But I was building an empire instead of protecting my family." Zara studied his face, seeing past the controlled exterior to the man who carried that guilt like a physical wound. "Is that what Maya and I represent?" she asked carefully. "Your second chance to do it right." Junho moved closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, could see the faint scar along his jawline that she'd noticed their first night. "You represent something I thought I'd lost forever," he said quietly. "The possibility of having people in my life who matter more than power or territory or revenge." Minjun would have loved Maya. He would have spoiled her terribly and taught her terrible jokes in Korean. A smile flickered across his features, brief but genuine. "He would have liked you too," he continued. "You have the same stubborn integrity he did, the same refusal to compromise your values even when it would be easier." "Maya calls you Uncle June," Zara said softly. "I know," he replied, his voice carrying wonder and something that might have been longing. "She loves you, completely, without reservation, the way children do when they feel truly safe." Junho's breath caught slightly, and for a moment, his careful control wavered entirely. "I love her too," he admitted, the words seeming to surprise him as much as they surprised Zara. "I love her curiosity, her fearlessness, the way she trusts so completely. I love watching her discover new things, hearing her laugh, seeing her safe and happy." "And me?" Zara asked, her heart hammering against her ribs. He reached out to cup her face gently, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone with tenderness that made her breath stop. You terrify me, he said honestly, because what I feel for you goes beyond protection or responsibility or even gratitude. You make me want things I gave up believing I could have. What kinds of things? A future that isn't built on violence and control, he said, his forehead resting against hers. A home filled with laughter instead of fear. The possibility of being someone worthy of the way Maya looks at me, the way you've begun to look at me. How do I look at you? She whispered. Like you see something good in me despite everything you know I've done. The space between them felt charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. Zara could feel the warmth of his skin, could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes, could sense the careful restraint that kept him from closing the final distance between them. The moment shattered when his phone buzzed with an emergency alert. Junho stepped back immediately, his professional mask sliding into place as he read the message. We have a problem, he said, his voice turning cold and focused. Intelligence reports indicate the Crane Syndicate has moved up their timeline. They're planning to strike within the next 48 hours. What does that mean for us? It means they've decided that subtle pressure isn't working, he replied grimly, already moving toward his desk, where multiple phones waited. They're going to try direct action to force my hand. What kind of direct action? The kind that targets Maya's school, your former workplace. Anyone they can use to draw you away from the estate's protection, he said, making rapid calls in Korean. They know I won't allow innocent people to be hurt because of my actions. But we're safe here, she said, though it sounded like a question. The estate is the most secure location in the city, he confirmed. But they're not planning to attack here directly. They're planning to make staying here emotionally unbearable by threatening everyone you've ever cared about until you agree to meet them on neutral ground. Zara felt ice spread through her veins as the implications became clear. She thought of Mrs. Patterson from the grocery store who'd always asked about Maya, of Jenny from the daycare who'd become a friend, of all the innocent people who might become casualties in a war they knew nothing about. I won't let other people get hurt because of us, she said firmly. I know, Junho replied, his voice carrying grim certainty. Which is exactly what they're counting on. Your protective instincts are your greatest strength and your most exploitable weakness. He finished his calls and turned to face her with the expression she'd seen that first night. Cold, calculating, absolutely lethal. But they've made one critical miscalculation, he said quietly. What's that? They assume I still operate like I did 3 years ago, focused on maintaining reputation and territorial control, Junho said, moving to a wall safe hidden behind one of his paintings. Now I have something infinitely more valuable to protect than my empire. I have my family. As he removed weapons and communication equipment from the safe, Zara realized that the next 48 hours would determine whether the safety they'd found together was real or just an illusion that was about to be shattered forever. The estate transformed overnight from luxury sanctuary into military fortress, though the changes were so subtle that Maya barely noticed beyond the increased number of friendly security guards who waved to her during her garden walks. Zara, however, recognized the signs of preparation for war. Armed patrols moving with lethal precision, communication equipment appearing in previously peaceful corners, and the tension radiating from every member of Junho's organization. Mommy, why do we have to stay inside today? Maya asked as Zara closed the curtains in their suite, following security protocols that felt increasingly ominous. Uncle June is handling some business problems, sweetheart, Zara replied, pulling Maya close for a hug that was as much for her own comfort as her daughter's. We just need to stay safe while he fixes everything. Maya accepted this explanation with the trusting simplicity of childhood, but Zara's stomach churned with anxiety as she watched Junho coordinate his response to the Crane Syndicate's threats. He moved through the estate like a general preparing for battle, issuing commands in rapid Korean, reviewing intelligence reports, and making decisions that would determine whether they lived or died. The first wave of Junho's retaliation began at sunset and continued through the night. Zara didn't witness any of it directly, but she could feel the systematic dismantling of the Crane Syndicate's infrastructure through the constant stream of phone calls, the grim satisfaction on his lieutenants' faces, and the way tension gradually bled out of the estate's atmosphere as each threat was neutralized. By dawn, it was over. The Crane Syndicate no longer existed as an operational organization. Their leadership had vanished, Their assets had been seized. Their networks had been absorbed or destroyed. Marcus Williams had been found dead in a warehouse, along with the men who'd helped him track Zara's location. The threat that had haunted their happiness for months had been eliminated with surgical precision. But the man who returned to their suite that morning carried the weight of what he'd done in the shadows under his eyes and the careful distance he maintained when Maya ran to greet him. "Uncle June," Maya cried, launching herself into his arms with complete trust. "Did you fix all the problems?" "Yes, little one," he said quietly, holding her close despite the blood Zara could smell on his clothes and the metallic scent that clung to him like a warning. "All the problems are fixed now." Zara watched him with Maya, seeing how he struggled to reconcile the tenderness he felt for her daughter with the violence he'd just orchestrated to protect them both. When Maya finally returned to her art project under Miss Chin's supervision, Zara followed Junho to his office. "How bad was it?" she asked, though part of her didn't want to know. "Thorough," he replied, pouring himself whiskey with hands that trembled almost imperceptibly. "The Crane organization will never threaten anyone again. Neither will Marcus or his associates. And the innocent people they might have used as leverage. Safe," he said, meeting her eyes with an expression that begged for understanding or absolution. "I made sure every potential target was protected before taking action. No civilians were harmed." Zara studied his face, seeing past the controlled exterior to the man who'd just done unspeakable things to protect their family. She should have been horrified, should have recoiled from the violence he'd orchestrated, should have questioned what kind of future they could build on a foundation of blood and fear. Instead, she felt profound relief and gratitude so overwhelming it scared her. "Thank you," she said quietly. Junho's eyes widened slightly, as if her response was the last thing he'd expected. "You're thanking me for becoming a monster." "I'm thanking you for protecting Maya," Zara replied firmly. "I'm thanking you for making sure she never has to be afraid of Marcus or anyone like him ever again. I'm thanking you for being willing to do what I couldn't do myself. You don't understand what I've done, what I'm capable of. I understand that my daughter is safe because you love her enough to carry that darkness so she doesn't have to," Zara said, moving closer to him. "I understand that you gave us a future by eliminating our past." The possession declaration came later that night, after Maya had fallen asleep and the estate had settled into the quiet that follows the end of war. Zara found Junho in the garden, standing among his orchids with the devastated expression of someone who'd won everything and lost himself in the process. She approached him slowly, seeing how he flinched slightly when she reached out to touch his arm. "You saved us," she said simply. "I destroyed them," he corrected, his voice hollow. "I killed 17 people tonight, Zara. I tortured information out of men who begged for mercy. I became everything I swore I'd never become again." "You became everything we needed you to become," she replied, turning him to face her. "You became our protector, our salvation, our family." Something broke in his expression, the careful walls he'd built around his heart cracking under the weight of her acceptance. "You're mine," he said suddenly, the words torn from somewhere deep inside him. "Both of you. I can't pretend this is just protection anymore. I can't pretend I could ever let you go." The intensity in his voice, the raw need and possessiveness, should have frightened her. Instead, it felt like a declaration of war against anyone who would threaten their family, and Zara found herself responding with equal fervor. "And you're ours," she said firmly, her hands framing his face. "Broken pieces and all. Maya loves you completely, and I love you desperately, and we're never letting you go either." The kiss that followed tasted of grief and gratitude, of violence transcended by love, of two people who'd found their way to each other through darkness and chosen to build something beautiful from the wreckage of their past lives. When they broke apart, Junho rested his forehead against hers, his breathing unsteady. "Forever," he whispered against her lips. "Forever," she agreed, and meant it with every fiber of her being. They made love that night with the desperate intensity of people who'd nearly lost everything, claiming each other with hands and mouths, and whispered promises that felt like vows. Zara discovered that Junho was as controlled and thorough in his tenderness as he was in everything else, learning her body with the same focused attention he applied to protecting their family. Afterward, as they lay intertwined in the dark, Zara traced the scars on his chest, and thought about the man who'd slapped her employer and threatened her daughter, the man who'd just eliminated 17 people to protect them both. I used to think there was something wrong with me for being attracted to you, she admitted quietly. You're dangerous and violent, and you've done terrible things. And now, he asked, his fingers threading through her hair. Now I understand that you're dangerous and violent to everyone except us, she said, pressing a kiss to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. You're our monster, and that makes all the difference. Junho's arms tightened around her, and she could feel his relief in the way his body finally relaxed completely for the first time since they'd met. I love you, he said into the darkness, the words carrying the weight of absolute truth. I love Maya. I love the life we're building together. I love that you see something worth saving in me despite everything you know. I love you too, she replied, and realized that somewhere between the first slap and this moment, Park Junho had become not just their protector, but the center of their world. The next morning, Maya found them having breakfast together with an intimacy that hadn't existed before, their hands intertwined on the table, and their eyes holding secrets that spoke of claimed hearts and shared futures. Are you and Uncle June married now? Maya asked with the directness that only children possessed. Zara and Junho exchanged glances, and she saw her own certainty reflected in his dark eyes. Not yet, sweetheart, Junho said seriously. But would you like us to be? Maya's delighted squeal of approval echoed through the dining room, and Zara knew that whatever darkness lay in their past, their future would be built on love, protection, and the unbreakable bonds of a family that had chosen each other against all odds. 6 months later, the Park estate bloomed with the kind of happiness that transforms architecture into home. Maya had grown 3 inches and gained the confident bearing of a child who'd never known a day of uncertainty about where her next meal would come from or whether the people she loved would still be there tomorrow morning. At 4.5, she moved through the mansion with the easy familiarity of someone who belonged completely, chattering in bilingual sentences that mixed Korean endearments with English observations about everything from butterflies to business meetings. Zara barely recognized the woman she'd become. Gone was the exhausted single mother who'd counted every dollar and lived in constant fear of the next crisis. In her place stood someone who managed multi-million-dollar real estate developments, coordinated charitable foundations that changed lives, and attended city council meetings where her opinions carried weight that extended far beyond her official title. More importantly, she'd become the heart of a family that operated with the precision of Junho's business empire, but the warmth of genuine love. This morning felt different from their established routine, charged with anticipation that had Maya bouncing on her toes during breakfast and Junho wearing the expression of someone harboring a significant secret. Uncle June, Maya said, studying his face with the penetrating attention she'd inherited from both her parents. Why do you look like you're hiding something important? Do I look like that? He asked solemnly, though Zara caught the slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Yes, Maya announced with absolute certainty. You look like you did when you surprised me with the pony, except more nervous. Junho had indeed surprised Maya with a Shetland pony 2 months ago, claiming it was essential for her proper education despite having no logical explanation for why a 4-year-old needed to learn equestrian skills. Zara suspected it had more to do with Maya's casual mention that she'd never ridden a horse than any educational philosophy. Well, Junho said carefully, setting down his coffee and looking at Zara with an intensity that made her heart skip. I do have something important to discuss with both of you. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small velvet box that made Zara's breath catch in her throat. Maya gasped with delight, bouncing in her chair as if she'd been waiting for this moment her entire young life. Zara Coleman, he said, his voice carrying the same controlled precision he used for everything important. You have given me something I thought I'd lost forever. A family worth protecting, a home worth defending, and a future worth building. He opened the box to reveal a ring that was neither ostentatious nor simple, but perfectly suited to who she'd become, elegant, substantial, and designed to last forever. I love your strength, your intelligence, your fierce protection of everyone you care about, he continued, his dark eyes holding hers with unwavering intensity. I love how you've made Maya feel safe, how you've made me feel human, how you've turned this house into a home. Maya wiggled with barely contained excitement, her small hands pressed to her mouth as if trying to contain squeals of joy. "Will you marry me?" Junho asked formally. "Will you become my wife, Maya's legal mother, and the permanent matriarch of the Park family?" The proposal was quintessentially him, precise, comprehensive, and structured to address every aspect of their future together. Zara felt tears spilling down her cheeks as she realized how completely he'd thought through what marriage would mean for all three of them. "Yes," she managed, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes to all of it, forever." Maya's restraint finally broke, and she launched herself from her chair to hug them both simultaneously, chattering about wedding dresses and flowers, and whether she could be the flower girl. Junho slipped the ring onto Zara's finger with steady hands, then gathered both of them close in an embrace that felt like a promise of permanent security. The wedding, held 6 weeks later, reflected their unique family with ceremonies that honored both his Korean heritage and her American traditions. The morning began with a traditional Korean pyebeak ceremony in the estate's private chapel, where Zara wore a hanbok in deep burgundy silk that had belonged to Junho's grandmother. Maya participated with solemn concentration, carrying symbolic dates and chestnuts while dressed in a matching hanbok that made her look like a princess from a fairy tale. Junho's few remaining family members attended alongside Zara's chosen family: Mrs. Park, Miss Chun, Dr. Kim, and the estate staff who'd become surrogate grandparents to Maya. The ceremony was intimate but profound, conducted in Korean and English, binding not just two people, but creating the legal framework that would make Maya officially Junho's daughter. The American ceremony that afternoon transformed the estate's gardens into something from a magazine, with Maya serving as flower girl with the gravity of someone entrusted with a sacred mission. She scattered rose petals with careful precision, her face glowing with pride as she watched her mother marry the man who'd become her father in every way that mattered. When the officiant asked if anyone objected to the union, Maya stood up from her seat in the front row and announced loudly, "I object to waiting any longer because I want cake, and I want Uncle June to be my daddy officially right now." The laughter that rippled through their small gathering was warm and joyous, and Junho's eyes filled with tears as he realized that Maya had just claimed him as permanently and publicly as he'd claimed them. The transformation in their lives over the past 10 months felt miraculous in its completeness. Zara had gone from counting every dollar to overseeing charitable distributions in the millions. Maya had gone from chronic illness and instability to robust health and boundless confidence. Most remarkably, Junho had transformed from a man driven by power and revenge into someone whose primary motivation was protecting the happiness of his wife and daughter. His empire still existed, still commanded respect and fear when necessary, but it now served a different purpose. Instead of expanding territory or eliminating rivals, his organization focused on legitimate business growth and community protection. The real estate developments included affordable housing components. The restaurants provided job training programs for at-risk youth. The shipping company had become a model for ethical labor practices. Maya's future had been secured in ways that went far beyond financial trusts and college funds. She would grow up bilingual, culturally rich, and absolutely certain of her worth and her place in the world. More importantly, she would grow up understanding that love meant protection, that families chose each other, and that sometimes the most beautiful futures grew from the darkest beginnings. 3 months after their wedding, as autumn painted the estate grounds in brilliant colors, Zara found herself standing in the same garden where she'd first realized she was falling in love with the most dangerous man in the city. Maya was helping Junho harvest vegetables from their expanded garden, her laughter mixing with his patient instructions in Korean. "Mrs. Park, Mommy," Maya called, using the title that still made Zara's heart skip with joy. "Come see the pumpkins Uncle Daddy and I grew." Uncle Daddy had become Maya's preferred term for Junho after the adoption was finalized, a designation that made him smile every time she used it despite its complete lack of linguistic logic. Zara joined them among the pumpkins, accepting a soil-covered hug from Maya and a kiss from Junho that tasted of contentment and forever promises. "Look how big they got," Maya said proudly, patting a pumpkin that was indeed impressively large. "Uncle Daddy says we can make jack-o'-lanterns and pumpkin pie and pumpkin soup." Uncle Daddy has ambitious plans for our pumpkin harvest, Zara observed, meeting Junho's eyes with the familiar warmth that had replaced fear and uncertainty. Uncle Daddy wants his girls to have everything they desire, he replied seriously, and Maya giggled at his formal tone, while Zara felt her heart constrict with how much love she felt for this man who'd turned their lives into something beautiful. That evening, as they sat down to dinner as they did every night, Maya made an announcement that crystallized how completely their world had transformed. "I don't remember being scared anymore," she said matter-of-factly, cutting her chicken into careful pieces. "I used to remember being scared all the time, but now I only remember being happy." Junho's hand found Zara's across the table, their fingers intertwining with practiced ease, and they shared the look of parents who'd successfully created something precious, a childhood unmarked by the trauma that had brought them together. Later that night, after Maya had been tucked into bed with stories in both languages and promises that tomorrow would bring more adventures, Zara and Junho sat in their bedroom reviewing the day's small miracles. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked, curled against his side while he read reports that now focused on legitimate business expansion rather than territorial disputes. "Miss what?" he replied, his free hand stroking her hair with absent affection. "The simplicity of just surviving," she said, "before we had all this responsibility and happiness to protect." Junho set aside his papers and turned to face her fully, his dark eyes holding the certainty that had first attracted and terrified her. "I have never missed a single day of the life I lived before you and Maya," he said with absolute conviction. "I was existing, not living. I was accumulating power instead of building purpose. I was surviving instead of thriving. And now," she asked, though she knew the answer, "now I wake up every morning grateful that a desperate woman slapped me in a conference room and changed everything I thought I knew about what mattered," he said, pulling her closer. "Now I go to sleep every night knowing that tomorrow will bring another day of protecting the two people who made me remember what it means to be human." Zara thought about the woman she'd been 10 months ago, counting dollars and days until eviction, working 3 jobs and still falling behind, terrified that she couldn't provide Maya with the security and opportunities every child deserved. That woman couldn't have imagined this life, financial security beyond her wildest dreams, work that engaged and challenged her, and love that felt both safe and transcendent. Most importantly, she couldn't have imagined Maya growing up with the confident joy of a child who'd never doubted her place in the world or the permanence of her family's love. "I love you, Park Junho," she said quietly, using his full name the way Maya did when she was being particularly serious. "I love you too, Park Zara," he replied, and the sound of her new name in his voice still made her feel like the luckiest woman alive. Outside their window, the estate's security lights cast gentle illumination over grounds that had become their fortress and sanctuary. Somewhere in the distance, Maya slept peacefully in a bed surrounded by stuffed animals and books, dreaming the untroubled dreams of a child who'd never known true fear. They had built something extraordinary from the wreckage of their individual struggles, a family that operated with the efficiency of Junho's business empire, but the warmth of genuine devotion, a home that was both impregnable fortress and loving sanctuary, a future that stretched ahead of them bright, with possibility, and secured by love that had been tested and proven unbreakable. Zara had slapped Korea's most feared man and somehow found her way to a happiness she'd never dared imagine. Maya had gained not just a father, but a legacy of strength and protection that would see her through any challenge life might bring. And Junho had discovered that the greatest power he could wield was not fear or control, but the absolute devotion of a man protecting everything that made life worth living.